Have you ever wondered why some women live alone? No boyfriend, no partner, not even pretending to seek one? The answer isn't loneliness, heartbreak, or a lack of options. It lies somewhere deeper, something more unsettling, more raw, something that unravels everything we've been taught about a woman's purpose. Because when a woman chooses solitude, she isn't getting lost. She's finally finding herself. And that kind of discovery doesn't come wrapped in applause, likes, or companionship. It comes in silence, in resilience, in a kind of freedom most still can't fathom. No, she's not lonely. She's discerning. She's not cold. She simply got tired of setting herself on fire to keep others warm. There's something profoundly unsettling about a woman who doesn't need a relationship to feel complete, because it shatters the architecture of control, dismantles the myth of emotional dependence, and reveals a fierce truth. Most men don't know how to handle a woman who doesn't need to be saved, and most women are only beginning to see their reflection in that silent, unapologetic mirror of power. Carl Jung once said that everything we reject within ourselves becomes part of our shadow, and many of these women standing alone are reflections of the collective shadow. They are what many long to become, but few dare to embody. They don't cry out for love. They breathe quiet choices. They don't display themselves for attention. They retreat to protect what's sacred. They're less interested in charming princes and far more devoted to cultivating peace. And that unsettles people. Because while the world demands urgency to belong to someone, these women have discovered the profound power of belonging to themselves. The woman who lives alone, without a boyfriend, isn't adrift. She's operating from another realm, a realm where nothing is begged for, everything is chosen, where validation is irrelevant, presence is everything. And maybe that's why she ignites so much criticism, so much judgment, so many frantic attempts to label her. But what many still fail to understand is that behind her seeming absence, there is a presence that fills, that transcends, that quietly defies the emotional status quo. She doesn't crave just any kind of love. She seeks a love that expands her, not one that shrinks her spirit. And until that arrives, she stands steady, whole, and inviolable. Maybe you don't understand it yet. Maybe you mistake it for arrogance, hurt, or misplaced pride. But deep within you, buried beneath the noise, there is a question that won't leave you alone. What if that silent path is the only one that leads to the deepest kind of love? The one that begins within. The silence that cloaks a woman living alone isn't emptiness. It's sanctuary. And those who fail to grasp the value of that sacred space often call her cold, aloof, or broken. But what most miss is that she didn't build her fortress to lock others out. She built it to keep herself intact. Carl Jung also said that whatever we refuse to confront in ourselves, we inevitably project onto others. And maybe that's why so many confuse solitude with absence, when in truth, it is the rich soil of self-discovery. While most chase connection to fill an internal void, this woman turned her gaze inward. And there, within the vast, wild terrain of her unconscious, she faced the specters she had long evaded. The wounds of childhood, the silent betrayals, the false loves dressed up as salvation. Her decision to be alone wasn't born from fresh pain, but from scars that had finally healed. She didn't give up on love. She gave up on accepting imitations of it that only made her smaller. This woman knows chaos. She knows what it is to love until she vanished inside someone else. She knows what it is to give too much. She knows what it is to beg for crumbs that never should have been offered. But one day she awakened, and that awakening wasn't an explosion. It was a series of quiet devastations that stopped breaking her and started building her. What you see now isn't bitterness. It's emotional sovereignty. And sovereignty terrifies people because it demands depth, presence, and a ruthless kind of truth. She doesn't crave just any presence. She craves reciprocity. Empty promises don't move her anymore. Only real presence does. Maybe that's why she seems distant to some, because she doesn't seek a rescuer. She seeks to be truly seen. And that asks for more than smiles or practiced words. It demands a willingness to dive into emotional depths where few dare venture. And that's where many fall away. Not because she's complicated, but because she's complete. And when a woman becomes complete, she awakens two forces in the world: admiration and fear. Admiration from those who yearn for the same self-possession, fear from those who still believe they're halves waiting to be made whole. She's not trying to complete anyone. She's trying to overflow alongside someone who's already met themselves. Until that alignment happens, she remains solitary, not by misfortune, but by allegiance to her own spirit. This woman isn't retreating, she's safeguarding herself. There's a profound difference between isolation and preservation, but the world struggles to recognize that. A world that still claims happiness must arrive hand in hand with another. A world suspicious of those who walk alone, as if solitude were a sign of defect. Carl Jung once observed that convention leaves little room for authenticity, and this woman does not serve convention. She answers to her essence. She hears the same tired lines. You're too picky. You should lower your standards. No one's perfect. And she smiles. That quiet, unwavering, almost knowing smile. Because she understands that what they call picky is simply her baseline now. The baseline it took years of pain and awakening to define. She isn't looking for a flawless soul. She's seeking someone brave enough to love without breaking what they touch. Someone who's battled their own inner chaos and emerged tender, not bitter. And let's be honest, that kind of soul is rare. The discomfort she stirs doesn't come from her words. It radiates from what she embodies. She's walking evidence that you can be whole without anchoring to anyone else. And that shatters illusions. Men who rely on female insecurity feel exposed. Women still chasing approval feel unsettled. But she's not here to challenge them. She's simply existing. And the raw existence of a free woman becomes a brutal mirror for those still shackled to expectations. She's not rushing through life. She's not sprinting to soothe anyone's timelines. She honors her own rhythm. And that alone ignites a silent rage in a culture obsessed with instant gratification. She craves depth, while the world offers distraction. She craves presence, while the world deals in attention. She seeks soul-to-soul connection, while others chase the next fleeting validation. And when she says no, it's not to tease, it's to protect her sacred space. When she walks away, it's not drama, it's survival. When she chooses her solitude over hollow company, it's not pride, it's wisdom. And that wisdom, carved through grief and rebirth, is her quiet revolution. Because she's not here to entertain, she's here to be. And that unapologetic beingness is her rebellion. Maybe what disturbs the world isn't her solitude at all. Maybe it's the peace she found inside it. Carl Jung said, "Those who gaze outward dream, but those who gaze inward awaken." And that's the path she chose. It wasn't glamorous. It was a battlefield of ripping off layers, confronting ancient wounds, rebuilding from nothing. She no longer defines her worth through borrowed eyes. She sees herself, by herself, and that changed everything. How many times have you wondered whether being alone was a curse or a gift? How many times have you felt the need to apologize for not fitting into someone else's mold? She's wrestled with those questions too. She once thought solitude was her flaw in a world that worships couples, even unhappy ones. But one day she saw clearly, it's better to be alone than to disappear inside the wrong arms. And that day she made a vow to herself. Never again would she settle for less than what she truly deserves. Her journey isn't linear. There are moments of doubt, waves of nostalgia, nights wrapped in silence. But with each choice made in awareness, a quiet strength grows within her. She's come to understand that true love does not confine, does not consume, does not manipulate. The love she desires is one that frees, that nurtures, that uplifts without stifling. And until that love arrives, she continues to evolve alone, not out of arrogance, but out of integrity. This woman embodies Jung's concept of individuation. She shattered, she confronted her shadow, she plunged into the depths of her unconscious, and emerged more whole than ever before. Now that she recognizes herself, she refuses to be anyone's half. She doesn't seek completion from another. She seeks to share her wholeness with someone who also knows themselves. This is intimidating because it requires emotional maturity, something rare in a world where many still love, out of lack, out of possession, out of fear. And if she walks alone today, it's because every step is a lesson. Each no she offers is an act of self-respect. Every absence she enforces is a reminder that love should never be begged for. She no longer feels the need to prove anything to anyone. And this certainty, grounded deep within her soul, changes everything around her. A woman who has rediscovered herself becomes dangerous, not because of weapons, but because of her clarity. The woman who stands alone without a partner is not the same woman who once begged for affection. Something inside her broke, and it was that very break that liberated her. Because sometimes only in destruction does the soul find its new shape. Carl Jung once said that the tree reaching for heaven must also have roots that sink into hell. And that is exactly the journey she endured. She ventured into the hell of her own past, confronted inherited fears and healed ancestral wounds, traumas that were not only hers but those of all the women who came before her. She broke the chains of repetitive patterns. She turned her back on relationships that replayed the same toxic scripts. She learned that it was never her responsibility to heal anyone, to save anyone, or to accept scraps for the sake of avoiding loneliness. And when she stopped accepting less, the world tried to make her doubt herself. But she held her ground, first with uncertainty, then with awareness, and finally with an unshakable strength. Because someone who has stared into the abyss no longer fears solitude. She learns to nourish herself with silence and warm herself with her own presence. She's not unreachable. She simply doesn't allow herself to be invaded. There's a world of difference between opening your heart and allowing it to be torn apart. She opens, yes, but only to those who come with sincerity, not rehearsed lines or empty promises. She's seen enough to know the difference between genuine presence and mere performance. Her intuition is razor sharp. Her energy has become a filter. She can sense the lack of depth from a distance, and she doesn't hesitate to walk away. Her transformation isn't superficial. It's archetypal. It's as if she's tapped into ancient wisdom, a forgotten memory, that women were never meant to serve, but to express, not to be molded, but to overflow. And in unlocking that memory, something wild awakened in her. A woman who is intuitive, emotionally sovereign. A woman who, though alone, is far from lost. She is in communion with something greater, her own destiny. And no matter how much they try to label her, cold, difficult, distant, nothing sticks, because she no longer lives to fit in. She lives to expand. She no longer fights for attention. She radiates presence. She no longer waits to be chosen. She does the choosing. This shift in power baffles those who still try to control the feminine. But she's already crossed that threshold. On the other side, she discovered that the true relationship begins only after you've loved yourself enough to not need anyone. There's something sacred in the way she moves through the world. She needs no applause, no public validation. Her confidence is quiet, and it is in that silence where her true strength resides. Carl Jung once said that everything we confront within ourselves eventually shapes our destiny. And perhaps that's why this woman, by choosing herself time and time again, has become the author of a destiny few can truly understand, yet many secretly admire. She no longer seeks to fill the emptiness with empty promises or convince anyone of her worthiness of love. She doesn't beg for space in anyone's life, because she knows that true presence is never something to be begged for. It's something to be invited. And when that invitation doesn't come from truth, she simply declines. She doesn't react with anger or bitterness. She steps away with the dignity of someone who has been lost too many times to ever allow that same wound to reopen. What many fail to grasp is that this woman still craves love. She still yearns to be held, to be touched, to be chosen, but only if she can do so without losing herself. For too long, she tried to force herself into spaces too small to contain the vastness of her soul. Now she only offers herself where there's room for her to be whole, and that requires a level of maturity that goes beyond romance. It requires awareness. It demands confronting one's own shadow and still choosing to love. She isn't looking for fairy tales. She's looking for a soul alliance, a connection where neither dominates nor submits, where both can grow side by side without dimming each other's light, silencing each other's pain, or shrinking each other's dreams. And if that seems too much for some, so be it, because she would rather wait than survive on scraps of love. To many, that sounds like arrogance, but it's simply self-love in its most authentic form. We are witnessing the rise of a new archetype of woman, a woman who has turned away from the superficial and plunged into the depths, who grew tired of being merely desired and chose to be respected, who chose solitude not because she gave up on love, but because she came to understand that true love never demands self-denial. And once a woman grasps that truth, her entire world begins to shift. She doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Her mere presence speaks louder than any words. Wherever she goes, the energy in the room changes, subtle yet undeniable. This isn't mysticism, it's energy. It's the gravity of someone who has faced the harshest inner battles and returned in peace. Not because she conquered every fear, but because she learned to coexist with them without being defeated. Carl Jung would say she found wholeness not by eliminating opposites, but by integrating them. This woman doesn't reject love. She simply refuses to submit to imbalanced relationships where one person must shrink so the other can shine. She longs to love, but in a love where her essence doesn't need to be altered. A love where she can be both shadow and light, joy and sorrow, silence and storm. Because she understands that those who only love the light haven't yet learned what love truly is. And those who demand constant sweetness still don't grasp the beauty of bitterness, that which is essential for growth. She is too whole to settle for halves, too free to accept prisons disguised as care, too sensitive to endure shallow connections. And yet she is strong enough to continue on this path, even when it hurts, even when it's lonely, even when it's misunderstood. This is the journey of an awakened soul, choosing deeper truth over instant validation. Deep within, the world fears women like her, women who don't need, who don't bow, who refuse to be molded, because they challenge invisible systems, question old patterns, and dismantle silent emotional contracts that once told a woman she was only valuable if she was with someone. And when she breaks those contracts, when she rewrites her own story, she inspires others. And that is a threat to the old system. So she marches forward, sometimes with tears in her eyes, sometimes with her head held high, but always with her feet firmly planted on the ground. Because now she knows she is never alone. She is with herself. And after everything she has endured, that is more than enough. The love that comes after this won't be salvation. It will be celebration. It won't come to fill her. It will come to overflow. When a woman chooses to walk alone, the world will rush to tell her she's making a mistake. But deep within, she feels something aligning. It's not pride nor rebellion. It's a rare wisdom born only in silence. The wisdom Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, without masks, without compromise. And when that moment comes, nothing outside her holds more power than the truth that beats within her chest. That truth doesn't need to scream. It reveals itself in the way she quietly shuts a door, free of resentment, in how she steps back when an environment no longer nurtures her, in the peace of her smile, even in solitude, because she's realized that being alone isn't punishment. It's a sacred vow of loyalty to her own soul. And the soul of an awakened woman does not submit. It does not shrink. It does not beg. It simply exists. And that is enough. The world will continue to try and convince her she's lacking. It will keep offering distractions, shallow facades, love meant for show. But she has already seen beyond the veil. She knows now that it's not about finding someone. It's about never losing herself again. And when that realization blooms, everything shifts. Desire becomes discernment. Lack becomes choice. Waiting becomes a path. And what once caused pain now becomes a teacher. What once held her back now sets her free. You can feel it deep within, the stirring, the spark. Perhaps it's a memory, an old wound, a longing that never made sense. Maybe it's the image of a woman you once knew, or the woman you are becoming. In either case, something inside you is asking to be seen more clearly. Something that no longer fits within the confines of old molds. Something that, if you allow it, could completely transform how you relate to love, to others, and most importantly, to yourself. The woman who walks alone is more than someone who doesn't fit the mold. She is a living symbol of emotional freedom, a reminder that it's possible to rebuild without rushing, without fear, and without the need to prove anything to anyone. She doesn't walk ahead of anyone, but she doesn't follow either. She carves her own path, unique, inviolate, and along the way, she ignites small fires for others who are waking up too. If something inside you has been stirred by this story, perhaps it's because deep down, you are also ready for a new kind of love. A love that begins with reconciling with yourself. A love that thrives on silence, presence, and truth. A love that can't be negotiated, begged for, or disguised. And if that love hasn't arrived yet, maybe it's because you first needed to become the woman who no longer accepts less than she deserves. And if this message reached you at the right moment, or awakened someone you thought was lost, then I invite you to share it. Send this video to other women who need to remember their own strength. Like it, comment, and subscribe. Not out of impulse, but by choice. Because when something touches your soul, the least you can do is let it continue to resonate within you and through you.